2025 Early Connections Conference, Expression, presented by the Van Sloun Foundation. Early Connections Conference logo. Empowering blind students, best practices for educators.
Tom Gerasi. I am a Perkins Outreach alumni, and I currently am an intern with the Marketing and Development Department. And today I am presenting on how to empower blind students with the best practices for teaching them in the classroom, at home, and in all other environments. Little background on me: I was born 4 months early with retinopathy of prematurity. I'm legally blind in both eyes. The left eye is my stronger one. I attended public school through grade 6, and then in 7th grade I transferred to a smaller private school. I was the only blind student in my school, which really helped me get a leg up in the self-advocacy department. I had a TVI, but I didn't have a TVI going everywhere I went, telling my teachers, what I needed. I had to do a lot of that work myself, and it really helped me become more confident in what I needed as a student. And I'm currently a student at Merrimack College, majoring in communication with minors in marketing and religion. So blind kids do become blind adults, and you can definitely see that at Wright. That picture up top is a picture of me when I was a baby, and this picture on the bottom is a picture of me from last year. So I'm still the same guy. I still have a lot of the same needs and the same vision, but they manifest themselves kind of differently over time. Every step of the way, I've been blessed to have really great educators, really great parents who've supported me. Without those great educators and great techniques that I've had, I don't think I'd be where I am. A big part of what's made me successful is the tools that I've had from a young age to help me academically. 5 classroom tools that I found really helpful as a young blind student and as a college student now. A lot of these are still pretty applicable. Thinking about seating arrangements, identifying yourself, embracing tactile learning, using high contrast, and using accessible materials, whatever's accessible to the student. Really, all of these are about being as accessible as possible, being as accommodating as possible. I think the number one thing you can do as an educator or as a parent is to encourage that students sit in a place that's best suited for whatever their needs are. This can manifest itself in really different ways depending on how the student learns, what their vision is. For a lot of low vision students, myself included, this means sitting in the front row, sitting close to the teacher, sitting close to the whiteboard, sometimes even sitting close enough that they can physically see the whiteboard without additional magnification. That can be really helpful because it allows for the student to really feel like they're getting the whole educational experience. Multisensory learning is really, really effective. I remember that I often learned things not only through processing it auditorily, but also seeing it visually or interacting with the rest of the class doing an activity, sometimes all at once. So really whatever ways you can make it so that your students are as engaged with the class as possible in whatever ways they need to. But you also need to consider other considerations for students. So for instance, CCTV users, they need to be in a place where, their CCTV can be plugged in, but they also don't feel like they're being too distant from the rest of the class, that they're not just isolated in a corner with their magnifier. For Braille writer users, you can take into account maybe easily distracted students who might not be a good fit to sit next to you, taking into account those individual needs of not only the student, but really the whole class, and making sure that your student needs don't get in the way of the whole class learning, but also puts their needs first. Another kind of thing that I think is really helpful is identifying yourself. This is especially true for students that might not interact with you every day, like a teacher who might see a student, once a week, and it might take a while for a student to really put the voice to the person because you just don't see them all that often. And this is especially true for younger students. Identifying yourself allows blind students to associate voices to people. It allows for you to kind of include them right off the bat and for them to feel really connected. For me, as someone who has gotten really used to identifying voices and putting them to people's names, I don't necessarily need this all the time anymore. But for younger blind students or for people who I'm not very familiar with even now, it is still really effective. Like someone who I interact with once and then only see like a month later, I'm not going to remember who you are. So identifying yourself can be really helpful in allowing your blind students to really make that connection, and for them to feel more like their needs are being taken accounted for. Like you see a cane and then you're like, hi, what's your name? oh yeah, my name's this. Next time you see him, identify yourself again and keep identifying yourself until you get cues that your student's identifying who's talking to them, which might be by them saying hi to you or them identifying you before you even need to identify yourself. Like, there's different ways you can kind of get cues that your student knows who you're talking to. And also, if you're a teacher who interacts with a student every single day, this might not even need to happen. But for more infrequent interactions or newer faces, it's really helpful. The next thing, and this is something that I'm going to focus a lot on because one thing that I'd say differentiates younger blind learners from blind adults or whatever, I mean, we're all continually taking in more tactile information than a sighted person for sure, but younger blind students, especially those with multiple disabilities, tactile learning really can make or break a student's ability to take everything in and to really get those basic skills down pat and to learn. They say a picture takes 1,000 words, but for blind students, I'd say that tactile activities and tactile learning takes more than 1,000 words because you're really giving them the world. A picture is really only a snapshot, but tactile stuff can really impact them and it can impact their ability to take in and retain information that you can't really have with just verbal knowledge or descriptions. You can't really do that. You can't have the full picture of an object because what's there to take in if you're being described something and your student might not even necessarily know everything that's being described to them or be able to take it in right away. But if you're doing it tactile, your student will have an infinite amount of ways to comprehend the stuff that's being taught to them. This can apply for everything from expanded core curriculum skills like Braille and O&M to even general education skills like making a math lesson or an English lesson come to life through tactile stuff. And this doesn't just mean Braille. A lot of the times people might think, oh yeah, tactile, that means Braille. But it really is so much more than that. And especially for younger students, you can find tactile learning opportunities everywhere you go. There's constantly opportunities for you to make new tactile environments come to life in your own house even, which I will go more in depth on in the next couple slides. But tactile learning, I think, is really important because it helps with fine motor skills, it helps with gross motor skills, it helps with information retention. I mean, all the things that a lot of blind students struggle with that wouldn't necessarily be as adequately dealt with just verbal descriptions. Tactile learning really bridges the gap between any areas that your student might be struggling with and them really getting it. Having that click moment where they just feel like they're understanding the material, that's something that tactile learning can deliver. So for younger students, toddlers and preschoolers especially, some ways that tactile learning can be used in the home. They always say that the parents are the first teacher, and I feel like this is kind of proof of that. Like, these are just everyday activities, using playground, sorting objects, pinching objects, pushing buttons, finger painting, tracing, drawing, turning things, stacking things, using just everyday household objects in a way that really ignites their natural curiosity for how the world works. That, I feel, is the most important way for these students to learn, even before they're getting formal Braille education or formal blindness skills education. They're getting exposure to how the world operates through their hands and through their body. And this is something that, honestly, a lot of sighted kids could take advantage of too. But for blind students who don't have the benefit of being able to intake visual information or not being able to take it in as much or as heavily as a fully sighted person, I feel like tactile home activities really are a good thing for them. Something that I remember really using a lot when I was younger is WikiSticks, which allowed me to map out routes that I was taking. I could use a tactile model to map it out, run my hands over it, and I feel like that's way easier than someone telling me, okay, you take this term, and you take that one, and then you'll bang a UE and all these other things. Like, no, that's not helpful for a blind student. Even now, my biggest pet peeve is when someone says, oh, it's over there. So having these tactile opportunities rather than just using often vague visual descriptors that a blind person might not necessarily understand really can make the difference for allowing younger students to understand everyday concepts and the world around them. And as students grow older, there's other kind of ways that you can bring tactile learning more into more complex environments. So ways that you can do that include using books that combine Braille and tactile objects, taking field trips to museums where you can interact with exhibits tactilely. They do exist, believe it or not. Going on a sensory trail, we have a really good Braille trail right here on the Perkins campus. It has a lot of great sensory immersion opportunities, but a lot of trails will also have sensory experiences. They don't even need to necessarily market it as a sensory thing because you can just go through the trees and smell things and touch things and be immersed in a natural environment and really ignite your senses at the same time. Also, using multisensory objects at home, like using electric toothbrushes instead of a regular toothbrush. This is really good for just sensory integration. It can really stimulate kids and allow for kind of a mundane everyday experience to really become more integrated with their senses. Using bump dots to orient to everyday objects, like putting them on the microwave, putting them on their dressers, even putting them on clothes so that students can tactily identify what colors their clothing is. That can be really beneficial for students who have no usable vision. They might not be ready to use an app that describes colors yet, so having those bump dots and having a different one like for red, for orange, for yellow, that can really help. Using WikiSticks, as I mentioned, that is a game changer for O&M. I would highly recommend it. I used it all the way up until 6th grade. I love those things. And then finally, tactile puzzles and games, like hiding objects in shaving cream. It allows for students to identify objects in areas where they might not necessarily expect them to. And also, because shaving cream is white, for students with low vision, they'll be forced to learn tactilely. And that can be really effective because you kind of need a working base for tactile skills in case, your vision declines or in case you need stuff to fall back on. It's really helpful, regardless of how much vision you have, to really learn those tactile skills and put them into practice. For low vision students, using high contrast colors for activities is really important. There's a few different ways that you can make stuff high contrast. Over by the right side of the screen, you'll see that red and green are high contrast, light blue and pink are high contrast. High contrast, however, and other visual solutions are not a replacement for tactile activities or developing blindness skills. They're really just other tools in the toolkit. Like I was still receiving Braille instruction every week, sometimes multiple times a week until my sophomore year of high school, because I still wanted to learn Braille until I was fluent in it, and then also just learning other blindness skills while I'm at it. Like I kept I'm still attending blindness programs to this day. I'm 22 years old, because I still need to learn those skills. Even though I have a lot of usable vision, that doesn't change the fact that I am legally blind, and I need to have as many tools as I can so that if it's dark out or if I'm in an unfamiliar environment or if there's just a new situation that throws me off, having those skills, both blindness and low vision skills, can really be impactful. So even if your child has significant usable vision, I would never not want to have those non-visual skills as an option to learn, because those can really be helpful down the road. You might not necessarily know it now, but non-visual skills really, really help. And finally, using accessible materials is obviously important, because without using accessible materials, how is your student going to access what they're learning? But for younger students, you might not necessarily know what they want yet or what is kind of a best fit for them. So I feel like the best practice is to introduce them to any methods that they could be able to access materials with. This could be large print, digital, Braille, tactile, any combination of those. Eventually they'll find out what fits best for them, and of course you want to encourage them to discover what's best for them, really discovering what methods are preferred by the student. And now for questions and answers. So what kinds of supports did I use for O&M when I was old enough to navigate school independently? This was from Michelle back on our Instagram. So once I was able to navigate school independently, we went out into the community. We started doing, I was from Newton, Massachusetts, which is just west of Boston. So I was able to use the train to get into the city and do orientation lessons in Boston. I was able to navigate around village areas in Newton. In 9th and 10th grade, I would go to the bigger public high school in my town and learn how to navigate around there, which is a more visually complex environment. And that was really helpful in gaining my confidence. And then also, I took things over the summer. Like I went to the Carroll Center for the Blind and I went to Perkins, and I did summer programs for like 5 or 6 weeks at a time. It really helped me hone in on those blindness skills and really intensely focus on them, because unlike in school where I have all these academics and my O&M lessons might only be an hour long in some cases, I was able to really focus on gaining blindness skills over the summer. That's when I was really able to not focus on anything else other than just gaining the blindness skills. And then also, once I turned into high school, I stopped doing my O&M during the school day and I started doing it after school, which allowed me to take longer lessons, 2 3 hour lessons in Boston, which I would not be able to do if I was just confined to a 1 hour long open block in my schedule. And that really allowed me to do those more complex O&M lessons in Boston rather than just sticking to areas in the immediate vicinity of my school. Because there's only so much you can do around there. Maryland School for the Blind asked if there are any aspects of college that I wish I'd been greater prepared for that would help TVIs better prepare for their students. I'd say the reading load and the writing load. I was really prepared on the self-advocacy front in terms of how do I request accommodations from people. I wasn't as prepared for the big jump in reading and writing that would occur between high school and college. Something that really has helped me though is using accessible reading apps like Bookshare. If I'm feeling fatigued, I can use the audio instead of just relying on large print. I can literally have the books being read to me while I'm doing other things, or if I just need a break from my eyes and just want to focus on the context of the book without being strained, that can be really helpful. Rachel asks, do you have any tips for how smartphones like an iPhone 11 can help me in school? Yes, I do. So there's a lot of really good apps out there for blind students, blind people really. Using assistive technology is a game changer. I don't know where I would be without having my phone or having an iPad really. An iPad I'd say is more helpful in the classroom if I'm being honest. It's larger and it's more similar to a computer, so you can do more assignments on there. You can use Zoom text, you can use VoiceOver, you can use all these different features on there to make your life easier so that if you feeling fatigued, if you're low vision and you want a more blind, non-visual option, or if you're fully blind, using the accessibility features on any Apple device is really helpful. And the same goes for an iPhone, although I use that mostly for personal use. I have an iPhone X at home, and I've been using it really often for, magnification. So, if I'm at a restaurant or something, I'll use it. Or if I'm in just any sort of area where I'll need a magnifier, having my phone on hand is really, really handy. Justine asked, how do you manage getting from place to place and navigating transportation in high school and college? So this kind of goes back to the O&M stuff I was talking about. I got really, really good training in high school on how to use the MBTA, the light rail, the trains, the buses, all the different transit options that Greater Boston has, so that when it came time for me to transition to college, I knew exactly how everything worked. I go to school close enough to Boston that I can actually take the train home whenever I want, and I know the route like the back of my hand. I use the train all the time. I have a blind access card. Any blind person in all of Massachusetts can actually get a blind access card that allows them to use any MBTA services for free with a guide as well, who also will get on for free. So it's a really, really good option. So when it comes time for your student to start learning public transportation, that can be really beneficial. And I would definitely recommend teaching, pushing for them to get maybe longer O&M classes once they hit middle school so that they can start doing those more complex lessons. Maybe not even complex, just longer lessons. You can't just take time out of a school day to do a lesson on the train or something, but you can do that after school. So I really push for that, and I think that really helped me honestly transition to college better, because without those longer form O&M lessons, my only real longer O&M would be during the summer, and that leaves 9 months of the year where I wouldn't be learning and doing those longer lessons and learning, higher order O&M skills that I can use for the rest of my life. And then finally, what school subject was the hardest to learn from an accessibility standpoint, and how did me and my teacher navigate those challenges? It's funny because, I'm kind of going through a situation like that now. I have to do an accounting class for my marketing minor, and accounting is very different. Some of the financial forms that we're looking at can't really be as easily enlarged because they would have to fit on a single page. But one thing that I've really pushed for in all of my college classes and my high school classes is going to my teachers ahead of time and being like, hey, I'm legally blind. Here are the accommodations I need. If you have any questions, I'm happy to meet like after class. And my teachers and professors have always been very accommodating. As far as like during K to 12 goes, hardest subject would probably have to be science because I did find some of the labs to be a little hard. A lot of the labs were pretty visual, and while I was able to use a magnifier, it would, you'd have to get a bit more creative with a fully blind student. But there's definitely ways around it. Perkins has numerous articles, many, many, many articles on the website specifically about accessible science. So if your student is struggling in a science class, I would definitely recommend looking at those articles to give you some inspiration. That's the end of my presentation. I'm really hoping that you learned something new from that and that you are able to take it back to your classrooms or your home or wherever you are kind of viewing this from. Just remember that, accessibility, it doesn't just exist in a vacuum. You really do need to help your student make every aspect of their life accessible. So using the tips that are from this presentation, and other tips that you learned throughout this conference, I hope that you can really learn to make your life as accessible as possible. Make your child's life, whoever you're working with, as accessible as possible, because it really will set them up for the best possible success as an older student, as an adult, as a lifelong learner, really. So, yeah, thank you guys for watching that.